Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as I mentioned, will be in Washington next week to meet with President Trump to discuss a ceasefire for Gaza. The arrangements have pretty much been made. It's whether or not Hamas will join in. Now, in advance of this trip, as I mentioned, the Likud ministers have called for the Israeli government to declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. I think it's probably a historic statement, certainly significant. Joining me now to discuss this and more, live from Tel Aviv, is Ruthie Blum, columnist and senior contributing editor at the Jewish News Syndicate. She is also a former advisor at the office of Prime Minister Netanyahu. Ruthie, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for staying up late and joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let me ask you this. How significant is this meeting next week between President Trump and the Prime Minister from the perspective there in Israel?
Very significant, as have been all his meetings with President Trump. And we've seen the results of those meetings. I mean, let's not forget this amazing joint victory that Israel and the United States had in defanging Iran's nuclear program.
Now, as and I'm pretty close to this, my read on this is I see in my previous meetings with the Prime Minister I think I've met with him 3 times since October the 7th. Number one, get the hostages back. Number 2, eliminate the threat of Hamas. Number 3 on the list was the existential threat of Iran. Now, Iran being taken out, as you said, defanged, their proxy network in shambles. Now there's this discussion, once again, of expanding the Abraham Accords, which we see Saudi Arabia, Qatar potentially recognizing Israel. We could see a peace, at least a manageable peace, is in the foreseeable future. But there are some, like Saudi Arabia and others, wanting to say, well, we got to have a 2-state solution. We got to find a state for the Palestinians. We got to carve out some land for them. Was this statement by the Likud ministers kind of preemptive to make sure that's not even on the table?
I'm sure that was part of it. But another part is the Abraham Accords. When the Abraham Accords were announced, and they were signed in September 2020, during President Trump's first term in office. Ahead of that announcement, Prime Minister Netanyahu had said that on July 1st, we're going to declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. That was in 2020. And then, because of the Abraham Accords, Prime Minister Netanyahu decided that he would postpone that in order to sign the Abraham Accords, probably because President Trump asked him to. And he agreed because this was so important to sign those accords. And now that we're back again with discussions of the Abraham Accords, I think that these ministers, also this is the first time that Israel has had a completely right-wing government with many religious members, that to take the opportunity to remind Prime Minister Netanyahu that this is still on the table, especially ahead of his trip to Washington, and especially given the fact that Israelis understand that a 2-state solution is just ridiculous. There is no 2-state solution.
Well, post October the 7th, which Gaza was a de facto 2-state solution, and we saw that was nothing more than a launch pad for terrorism. The polling in Israel is very clear on this. I think there's only like 20% or so of the population will entertain that old notion of a 2-state solution. So it's clear that the Israeli public does not have a tolerance whatsoever for this continued international conversation of Israel once again being forced to give up land for peace. It doesn't work.
No, it's always land for war. It has been proven again and again and again. And Israel has done everything to make peace with the Palestinians and always conceding territory, and it never works. The opposite happens. Now, it's not only the October 7th massacre and the war in Gaza that makes Israelis understand that this is just impossible. It's that there's huge amount of terrorism going on in Judea and Samaria, and the Palestinian Authority
Right.
that was the de facto state, sort of, according to the Oslo Accords. It was a pre-state. Didn't even condemn the October 7th massacre.
Right. Well, and also, people in the United States here don't necessarily know the geography of Israel, but when you compare Judea and Samaria, which is the heart of Israel geographically and from its heritage standpoint, it's 24 times larger than the Gaza Strip. So if you consider all of the problems that have emerged from Gaza, just imagine magnifying that by 24 times.
Well, exactly. But, the discussion about the yanking Jews out of their homeland in order to make room for a Palestinian state, that was just part of it, that there are many more people in Judea and Samaria. But this is the biblical heartland of the Jewish people, number one. Number two, it is not occupied by Israel. First of all, Israel cannot occupy its heartland.
Right.
Three, when it was occupied by Jordan. And in the 6-Day War, when Jordan joined in, when all these Arab armies attacked Israel, that was when Israel won the war, and that is when those territories came back to Israel, so to speak, and it had nothing to do with Israeli occupation.
I know. I'm trying to remember which member of the Knesset made this point. It may have been Ohad Tal. Said, "How can you occupy a land, Judea? That's where the term Jew came from. How can you occupy the very place that you came from, that your name was derived from?" I think it's important as the American people being educated and standing with the right of Israel to declare sovereignty over the entire region of that country that is there. Anytime we get into dividing the land, it never works out well for Israel or for the United States. Ruthie, I got 30 seconds left. I'll give you the final word.
Well, my final word is that I'm hoping that this summit between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump will reveal some kind of bombshell, so to speak, about and some way to get the hostages out of Gaza without kowtowing to Hamas.
Yes, well said. Ruthie, thank you so much for joining us again. Thanks for staying up late.